Imagine waking up one day to find a door in your house, a door you've never seen before, locked tight, silent, and impossible to ignore. No matter how many times you check, it wasn't there yesterday. What secrets could it be hiding? What if behind that door lies something you were never meant to find? Tonight, I'm taking you inside stories of people who faced these impossible doors, where reality and nightmare collide, and the line between safe and terrifying disappears. If you think your home is safe, think again, because sometimes the scariest things come knocking when you least expect them. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a terrifying tale from verified Red Evil. Now, brace yourself, because the door is about to open. Let's move to our first story. It all began when I moved into a small, old apartment on the outskirts of the city. The kind of place that creaks with every footstep and smells faintly of damp wood and forgotten memories. I was excited, eager for a fresh start, until the day I found the door. It wasn't just any door, was a solid wooden door, unpainted and aged, tucked away behind a heavy bookshelf in my living room. The strange part was, I was certain it hadn't been there before. I had rearranged that shelf multiple times since moving in, and never once had I noticed this door. But now, it was staring back at me, locked tight with a rusted keyhole and no handle. Curiosity got the better of me. For nights, I lay awake, imagining what could be behind it. Was it an old storage room, a forgotten cellar, or something worse? I tried listening at the door, pressing my ear against its cold surface, but all I heard was silence, a silence that somehow felt heavier than any noise. Eventually, I found a small set of lockpicks online, cheap and secondhand, just enough to try my luck. When I finally managed to unlock it, the door creaked open to reveal a narrow, empty room, no bigger than a closet. The walls were bare, except for an ancient, cracked mirror that hung opposite the door. I stepped inside hesitantly and glanced into the mirror. At first, I saw only my reflection, tired eyes, pale face, and the flickering light bulb overhead. But then something changed. The reflection showed the room behind me, but instead of the apartment I stood in, it revealed a shadowy, twisted version of the same space. Shapes moved in the darkness, shifting just beyond recognition. I blinked, but the mirror didn't change. It showed me things I couldn't explain, shadowy figures lurking, watching, waiting. From that night on, my world started to unravel. Objects in my apartment would move when I wasn't looking. Soft whispers echoed just beyond hearing, and sometimes, in the reflection of the mirror, I saw fleeting images of myself, but distorted, grinning with a madness I didn't recognize. Sleep became a stranger. I was haunted not just by the door, but by what the mirror showed me, a dark version of my life, where fear consumed every corner. I stopped inviting friends over. I feared they'd see the door to the apartment felt like a trap. The door, a boundary between sanity and something far worse. I tried to cover it, block it with furniture, but the door always found a way to reveal itself. At times, I swore. It whispered my name in the dead of night, coaxing me to open it again. The mirror's reflection became a prison, showing not what was, but what could be, terrifying and inevitable. In the end, I left the apartment, leaving the door behind. But sometimes, in my dreams, I see that door opening just a crack, and I hear a voice, soft, inviting, promising answers and endless darkness. The door wasn't just in the apartment, it followed me. And I know it's only a matter of time before it appears somewhere else, waiting for the next person to unlock its secrets. Let's move to our second story. I never truly believed in the eerie stories about the abandoned house on Maple Street until the night my friends and I decided to explore it ourselves. For years, locals whispered about this house, a crumbling relic left untouched for decades, surrounded by overgrown weeds and broken fences. But what made it infamous wasn't just the neglect, it was the door. A door that shouldn't be there, or so the stories claimed. It was said to appear suddenly, on the side of the house, where no door had ever existed before, locked tight, no key, and something behind it waiting patiently. Many who dared approach said they heard noises behind it, scratching, knocking, but no one ever opened it. Some said those who tried vanished without a trace. We were young, hungry for adventure and proof. My friends, Sarah, Mike, and I packed cameras, flashlights, and a few tools, ready to capture something no one else had. We drove out as dusk turned into night, the fading sun casting long shadows over the empty street. As we stood before the house, a cold silence swallowed everything. The air felt thick, heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. The house was worse than I imagined. Broken windows stared like empty eyes, and the front door hung crooked on its hinges. We circled the building cautiously, flashlights piercing the darkness, and then we saw it, the door, a solid wooden door, set into a solid brick wall, where there was supposed to be nothing, no door frame, no sign of it ever existing. It was perfectly out of place, old but well preserved, and covered in strange carvings that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The symbols were unlike anything we'd seen, ancient shapes, twisted in patterns that made my skin crawl. Sarah stepped closer, shining her light on the door's surface. "It wasn't here before," she whispered, voice barely audible. And I nodded, sharing the same uneasy feeling. We pulled out the cameras, eager to document this impossibility. At first, nothing happened, just the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. But then came the faint knocking, soft at first, barely audible over our breaths. We froze. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, like a desperate call. We pressed our ears against the cold wood, but no one was on the other side. It was impossible. Then the scratching started, slow, deliberate, like nails scraping against the door's inside surface. Our hearts pounded. Sarah's face paled. "We shouldn't be here," she said, but none of us moved. We were trapped by curiosity and fear. Suddenly, a crack appeared. At the bottom of the door, no wider than a finger, a pale, translucent hand pushed through, fingers curling slowly, reaching out. Mike stumbled back, nearly dropping his camera. The hand vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving a cold mist swirling at the doorstep. Our phones buzzed with static, the screens flickering and going dark. Then came the voices' whispers in a language none of us understood, chanting our names with a mocking tone. The temperature dropped so suddenly we could see our breath, hanging like ghostly smoke in the air. Panic set in. We tried to back away, but the house seemed alive, warping the space around us. Walls shifted, shadows stretching unnaturally. The door reappeared, this time inside the hallway, blocking our escape. It was impossible, but it was there, as real as the terror choking our lungs. We pounded on the door, shouting, begging for it to open. Silence answered. The whispers stopped. Only the sound of our frantic breathing filled the space. Then the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, shaking the entire house. We scrambled, desperate to find another way out, but the house closed in around us. The walls groaned, dust falling from the ceiling as the air thickened with a suffocating presence. Mike dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "We shouldn't have come," he sobbed. Sarah clung to me, shaking. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were rooted in fear. Minutes or hours passed, I couldn't tell. Time lost meaning. The door remained locked, an unyielding barrier between us and freedom. Then, as if responding to some unseen force, the door slowly creaked open, revealing nothing but endless darkness beyond. A cold wind blew, carrying whispers of promises and threats. We looked at each other, frozen. None of us wanted to step through that threshold, but none of us could ignore the pulsallure of the unknown. Suddenly, a shadow emerged from the darkness, faceless, flickering like static on a broken screen. It moved toward us with an unnatural grace, silence trailing in its wake. Its presence sucked the warmth from the air, draining every ounce of hope. We ran, not through doors or hallways, but through the twisting nightmare the house had become. But no matter where we went, the door followed shifting walls and floors to trap us inside. It was a maze with no exit. The last thing I remember is the sound of my own voice echoing in that impossible place, begging for mercy, begging for the door to let me out. Then darkness. Weeks later, the police found the house empty, no sign of us, except one abandoned camera on the doorstep. Its final footage showed the door opening just a crack, and a chilling whisper echoing, "Don't open the door." The house still stands on Maple Street, waiting, and that door, it's still there, somewhere between worlds, inviting the next curious souls to step inside. Don't never come out. Let's move to our third story. The story I'm about to tell you is one that has haunted me for years. It didn't happen to me directly, but to my uncle Daniel, who lived alone in a remote countryside house. He was a quiet man, private, the kind of person who preferred books and the sound of rain to people and city noise. For years, he lived peacefully in that creaky old house, until the night he called me, his voice shaking with a fear I had never heard before. He whispered, "Only one thing," before the line cut off. "There's a door here. It wasn't here yesterday." I drove out to his property the next morning. The drive was long, the weather gray and heavy. His house sat at the edge of a dying forest, surrounded by thick fog that clung to the ground like it didn't want to leave. When I arrived, the house was unlocked, but Daniel was gone. What I did find was the door. It was in the back room, the one he had always used as a storage space. Except now, the room was completely empty, except for this door standing flush against the wall, perfectly fitted, as if it had always been there. But I knew for a fact it hadn't. I had spent countless summers in that house. That room had no doors, only windows. The door itself was unsettling. It was made of old wood, darker than anything else in the room, and it had no handle, only a strange metal keyhole shaped like a jagged tear. I felt a chill run through me as I approached it. There was a sound behind the door, faint shuffling, almost like footsteps pacing. Then a single knock, soft but deliberate. I stepped back instinctively, heart pounding. I tried calling Daniel's phone again, but it went straight to voicemail. I searched the house, the surrounding woods, everywhere, but he was gone. The door remained, an impossible fixture that seemed to watch me no matter where I stood in the room. I thought about leaving, calling the police, but something about the door kept me rooted. I needed answers. I couldn't just walk away. I found an old box of keys in Daniel's desk drawer. One by one, I tried them, kneeling in front of the door. Like a desperate intruder, most didn't fit. One did. When the key turned, the door unlocked with a sound like a sigh escaping an ancient lung. Slowly, I pushed it open. Behind the door was not another room. It was a hallway, impossibly long, stretching far beyond the physical limits of the house. The walls were damp stone, lit by a weak, sourceless glow. The air was thick and cold, carrying a faint metallic smell. I stepped inside, calling for Daniel. But my voice echoed strangely, bouncing back, distorted, like someone else was repeating my words. I walked for what felt like hours, each step heavier than the last. The hallway twisted and narrowed, leading me to doors on either side, doors identical to the one I had opened. Each was closed tight, but behind them I could hear muffled sounds, crying, scratching, soft pleading voices. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for one of the doors, but before I could touch it, something moved at the far end of the hallway. It was a figure. At first, it was just a shadow, but as it approached, I saw it was Daniel, or at least it looked like him. His clothes were the same, his posture familiar, but his eyes, they were black, like deep pits. He smiled at me, and the smile was wrong, stretched too wide. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, though his lips barely moved. "It's too late now." I stumbled back as he reached for me, but the hallway seemed to close in from all sides. I turned and ran, the echo of his footsteps chasing me. I could hear doors slamming shut as I passed, the voices behind them rising in a deafening chorus. Just when I thought I couldn't run anymore, I saw the original door ahead. I hurled myself through it and slammed it shut behind me, locking it with shaking hands. The house was silent again. I collapsed on the floor, heart racing, sweat dripping down my back. The door stood there as if nothing had happened, perfectly still, perfectly ordinary. But I knew better. I grabbed my phone and called the police. When they arrived, I told them about Daniel, about the door, about everything. They searched the house, the woods, even the back room. But when I brought them to it, the door was gone. The wall was solid, as if it had never existed. Daniel was never found. His name became just another missing persons case, buried in the local news. But I know what happened to him. I know where he is. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about that hallway, those endless doors, and the voices begging to be let out. I wake up drenched in sweat, convinced that one day I'll find another door waiting for me. And next time, I might not be able to leave. Let's move to our fourth story. I was only 9 years old when I first heard the story of the fairy door in the woods behind our village. The older kids used to tell it around campfires, claiming it was a door that lured children in with promises of magic and wonder, but once you stepped through it, you never returned. It was the kind of tale adults brushed off as superstition, but it terrified me nonetheless. There was something about the way they described it, the tiny wooden door nestled at the base of a massive ancient tree its frame carved with symbols. That no one could understand that made it feel too real. One spring afternoon, after a fight with my parents, I ran into those same woods, tears blurring my vision. The further I went, the quieter it became, until I couldn't even hear the birds anymore. That's when I saw it. The fairy door. It was smaller than I imagined, just big enough for a child to crawl through, and it looked impossibly old. The carvings glowed faintly in the shadows of the forest, and for a moment I forgot my fear. I remember crouching down and peeking closer, and that's when I heard it. A voice, soft, sing-song, and kind. "Come inside," it whispered. "It's safe here. You'll never be alone again." I froze. The voice sounded like my mother's, only gentler, like how I wished she'd talk to me. I reached for the handle, but something in my chest screamed at me to stop. Then I saw it, the faint outline of a hand pressing against the wood from the other side. Its fingers were long, too long, scraping against the inside of the door as though it was impatient. I ran. For years, I avoided the forest, but the door never left my thoughts. When I was 16, my younger brother Thomas disappeared. He'd gone out to play in the woods and never came back. The search parties scoured the forest for days, but I knew exactly where to look. When no one was watching, I slipped away and retraced my steps to that same ancient tree. The fairy door was waiting for me, its carvings brighter than I remembered, pulsing like a heartbeat. I fell to my knees in front of it, calling Thomas's name. There was no response, only the same soft voice whispering, "Come inside. He's waiting for you." I didn't know if it was true or just a trick, but when I pressed my ear to the wood, I could hear faint sobbing on the other side. My brother. This time, I didn't run. I grasped the tiny handle and pulled. The door swung open with an almost joyful creak, revealing a tunnel just big enough to crawl through. I hesitated only for a second before climbing inside. The tunnel smelled of damp earth and something sweet and rotting. I called out for Thomas, my voice trembling, but the only reply was the sound of shuffling movement ahead. The tunnel stretched longer than it should have, twisting deeper into the earth. The further I crawled, the colder it became, until my breath fogged in the air. Then I reached a chamber. It was filled with dozens of children, standing perfectly still, their faces blank, eyes wide and glassy. They weren't breathing. At the far end, I saw Thomas, pale and unmoving, his small hands clasped in front of him like he was praying. I ran to him, shaking his shoulders, begging him to wake up, but he didn't move. That's when I felt the presence behind me. I turned and saw it, the thing that lived behind the fairy door. It was impossibly tall, its limbs thin and twisted, its face hidden behind a mask made of bark and bone. Its voice was soft as it crouched low, whispering in the same tone I'd heard years before. "Stay," it said. "You belong with us now. You'll never be lonely again." I grabbed Thomas and bolted, dragging his limp body through the tunnel. The creature didn't chase me. It didn't need to. Its whispers filled my ears, seeping into my mind, telling me to give up, that we would never escape. But somehow, I made it through the door. I kicked it shut behind me and collapsed in the forest, with Thomas in my arms. He never woke up. The doctors said he was alive, but unresponsive, trapped in some kind of coma they couldn't explain. It's been 10 years, and he's still lying in that hospital bed, eyes wide open but empty. I don't go into the woods anymore. But sometimes, I swear I hear that voice calling me from the tree line. Soft, gentle, promising that if I come back, Thomas will open his eyes. And every night, I dream about that door glowing faintly in the shadows, waiting for me to crawl through once more. Let's move to our fifth story. It started on an ordinary Thursday night. I came home from work, exhausted, and found a door in my bedroom that wasn't there that morning. At first, I thought I was imagining things. My apartment is tiny, I know every inch of it, but there it was, on the far wall, a solid white door with a brass knob, perfectly fitted, as though it had always been part of the room. My heart began to race. I touched the door, and it was cold, too cold for the warm room. I tried opening it, but the knob wouldn't turn, locked. I leaned my ear against it, listening. At first, there was nothing, but then I heard something faint, breathing, slow, steady, and definitely not mine. I stumbled back, my stomach twisting in fear. The door was completely flush with the wall, no seams around the frame. No way it could have been installed without me noticing. I decided not to mess with it and slept on the couch that night. The next morning, the door was gone. The wall looked exactly as it had before. I tried to convince myself I'd dreamed the whole thing, but that night, it was back. Same place, same cold brass knob. I decided to set up my phone camera, propping it up on my dresser to film through the night. When I reviewed the footage, the next morning, I nearly dropped the phone. Around 3:17 a.m., the door had slowly creaked open. A figure stepped out, a man, impossibly thin and hunched, with long, dangling arms. He stood at the edge of my bed, watching me sleep for hours, before stepping back into the door and closing it. I didn't go to work that day. I didn't even move. Every instinct told me to leave, but where would I go? This was my home. I couldn't just abandon it. That night, I barricaded the door with everything I could find: my dresser, my bed, even heavy boxers. I sat awake with a kitchen knife, waiting. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I heard it. The knob rattled. Soft knocking followed, patient and rhythmic. The voice came. "Please open the door," it whispered. It was soft, almost polite, but it carried a weight that made my skin crawl. I stayed perfectly still. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. "I know you're there," it said. "I saw you sleeping." I wanted to scream, but I held my breath. The barricade rattled violently as something pushed against it. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Silence filled the room. I stayed awake until sunrise, clutching the knife. The next day, I decided to move out. I called my landlord to break the lease, but he said something that froze me to the core. "That's impossible. No one's lived in that unit for over a year. It's condemned." I didn't know what to say. I hung up and packed my things in a frenzy. But when I went to leave, I noticed something. The door had moved. It wasn't in the bedroom anymore. It was in the living room, blocking the front door. I tried to move the furniture to escape, but the door swung open before I could. The same figure from the video stepped through, ducking to fit through the frame. Its arms scraped the floor as it shuffled toward me, head tilted at an unnatural angle. "I told you not to ignore me," it said. I ran into the bedroom and slammed the door, but when I turned, there was no window, no exit, only another door, identical to the one in the living room. I was trapped. I could hear the creature's footsteps approaching from the other side. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering for help, but the line was dead. The door handle began to turn, slowly, as if savoring my fear. I backed into the corner, knife shaking in my hand. That's when I realized the walls around me had begun to shift. They weren't solid anymore. They pulsed like living flesh, the room breathing with me inside it. The door swung open, and I saw nothing but darkness beyond. I don't remember stepping through. I don't remember dropping the knife. All I remember is waking up in this endless corridor, lined with doors just like mine. Some are closed, some are open, and from the ones that are closed, I can hear the breathing. I've been walking for what feels like days. I don't know if there's a way out. Every time I pass an open door, I feel something watching me, waiting for me to step inside. If I ever do, I'm not sure I'll come back. If you find a door in your home that wasn't there before, don't touch it. Don't open it. Don't even look at it. Because once it chooses you, there's no escaping.